All right, everyone, welcome back to another tour talk. It's been a really long time. I really only do these when I feel like they're kind of pressing and either pro shops or consumers have something they want to ask or talk to some of the figures and important people in bowling. And today I was able to get not only one of the top manufacturers, but in my opinion, one of the fastest growing manufacturers. You're probably seeing a lot of their content on social media now, KR Strikeforce. So I got three gentlemen here to talk to us today about tariffs, the supply chain and getting products. You know, are we going to see delays? Are we going to see huge price increases? How is it going to impact for the pro shop? How's it going to impact for the consumers? And so let me introduce you to everybody here. I hope I got all of their titles correct. So first off, the guy who kind of made this happen and was crazy enough to agree to it. And I can't emphasize enough, these guys, you know, really need a lot of credit because they weren't the only manufacturers that were asked, but they were the only manufacturers that agreed. So I really appreciate it. Huge kudos to you guys. But Jason Guest there in the middle, he is the Vice President of Sales and Products at KR. To his right on the screen is Brad Handelman. He's President of Sales. And then to Jason's left is Mike Stout, Executive Vice President of Sales. And now I believe Jason and Mike both also have pro shops. They also own pro shops. And so they're going to be able to add that perspective as well as pro shop operators. And I believe, I don't know, Brad, again, let me know. Do you have a pro shop too? I don't know. No. Okay. All right. Like I've already, you know, before the camera was rolling, I kind of already started off, you know, behind the ball with Brad. So, you know, I'm figuring it out. And we're getting going. So first off, I just want you guys to talk a little bit about KR's recent growth. You guys, you know, recently launched the new high performance shoe line, you know, and a lot of growth on the social media side. So bowling balls get a lot of attention, but what do you guys think is your differentiator, you know, as a company? What do you think has been the cause for some of your recent growth? And just help consumers know a little bit more about KR Strikeforce.
Well, I think there's lots of things that go into that, right? I mean, but I think truly our mission statement is we want to sell a product to every bowler in the world, right? You know, at every different level, you know? So, you know, we have everything from, you know, small accessories up to 4 6-ball bags. You know, we started working on our own bowling balls. You know, kind of the whole reason why we're having this call. We can shed some light on that, you know, but that's kind of been halted and now it's back on, and it's been very unpredictable to navigate. But yeah, I think really the growth is just, you know, the commitment to the products, right? You know, if you have good product, it'll sell itself. You know, you still need good salespeople, right? But if you have good product, the rest kind of falls into place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I know we really appreciated our partnership with you guys at Virtue Bowling Supply on the products, and the bags have always really been, at least for us, I can only speak from our anecdotal experience. The bags, you know, have always been the staple of KR Strikeforce in our stores, you know, the quality bags, the warranties, all of those kinds of things that go with it. So, but I know a lot of viewers are here for the tariffs and the China situation and those kinds of things. So let's I want to first start and ask you guys to help educate me and all of us on bowling's reliance on China and how that might maybe compare to other industries before we dive into, and I think after that, we'll go kind of chronologically with tariffs. So, you know, you had April 2nd, which was the Liberation Day, and I think it was 54% to start. And we'll talk about that. I want to make sure that people watching know has those changed. And I'd be curious if your guys' strategies changed or if you guys were kind of doing different things as all of that kind of crazy info was changing. But let's start off with just getting an understanding of bowling's reliance on China and China's manufacturing. Is it a lot, little?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tremendous, especially outside of the bowling ball, right? I mean, you've got, you know, bowling ball brands that are made here in the United States. You know, you've got some that are made just south of the border, right? And then you've got a bunch of other smaller brands that are made in China. But outside of that, as far as
There's one in Korea.
and there is a small one in Korea too, right? Good point.
Right.
So, but outside of that, as far as bags, shoes, accessories, all of that is almost 100% or was 100%
It's like
reliant on China.
It's 95% China. There's a little bit that comes from Korea, a little bit of our stuff that comes
Yeah.
from Taiwan,
Vietnam,
yeah,
right?
Vietnam.
You know, so
Okay.
yeah,
So pretty much if it's not a bowling ball, it's very likely it's coming from China. Now, what about the raw materials of bowling balls? Well, you know, is
Yeah.
that coming from China?
no,
No.
none of it, right? And
Raw materials for bowling balls.
yeah,
Yeah, like
China's
well,
coming
the
from
one
China.
the ones that are made in China, of course, are coming. But he's talking about like balls that are produced in the United States. Where do the raw materials come from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
they're all here as well.
Okay. So then, with that being said, would it be fair to say that we shouldn't necessarily see a big impact on ball pricing, or do you think ball pricing will still go up for some particular reason? I mean, obviously you don't manufacture balls, so you can't answer, but I mean, you do, but
Here's my opinion on the tariffs and how it's going to impact. Storm and Motive are made in the USA, and the materials, as far as I know, are sourced in the USA. I happen to think that I said this in 2018 with the first round of tariffs by Trump, that some of them are still in place, and now there's more. The reason it creates inflation isn't just from the pure product cost, right? So now things get made in the US and they cost a little bit more. And now the workers have to go buy them. And I don't care if it's Christmas presents or food or whatever, that all costs a little bit more.
sure.
So now I need to make more money
I see.
in order to afford it. So eventually, and no one has talked about this, and I watch the business news every single morning. Eventually, labor costs are going to go up in the United States. Now,
Right.
are there pockets where it doesn't? I can't speak to that, but I think what happens is products, we haven't even seen the worst of this yet. The inflation hasn't come yet. It's
Right.
Christmas is when people are going to have sticker shock. We started to see it in food.
Yeah.
My wife
Eggs,
made a comment
right?
yesterday about not just eggs, but everything. Like she went out to eat with my son for lunch, and she's like, couldn't believe how this place makes omelets.
Yeah.
Right. And so I
Right.
think what's going to happen is labor costs are going to follow at some point. And how does that affect bowling balls? Well, maybe,
Shipping.
Storm and Motive have to, the employees want to make more money, so you got to pay them more. And again, I'm projecting my personal view on it.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
that's great.
freight, right? So freight in the US has gone up in the last week tremendously.
Even though the tariffs we know are 30%, no one realizes they hiked the price of all the containers.
Yeah. Now
They
there's
gave us the green light.
with
shipping.
with a pause in the tariff to China, there's a mad dash to get your stuff shipped in
Right.
in that small window of time. So that creates a big log jam at the port, which then allows, the container prices to hike.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into the next question, which is, so we've established bowling is very reliant on China, and even if a particular product isn't made there, so many products are made there enough that prices will go up enough on enough other products that it's likely those people will need an increase in income. So then there's a price increase as well on the payroll costs, essentially the labor of being able to deliver the goods. So that's a segue into, so for those of you that don't follow it really closely, there was kind of maybe multiple events, and you guys can tell me if there are even more than this, but to my knowledge, you as a company, you might be strategically making decisions once Trump is being elected because he campaigned on tariffs. So you might have a strategy at that point. And then April 2nd is quote unquote Liberation Day, and I believe it started off at 54% on China was the tariff. And then by April 10th, so only 8 days later, it escalates to 145% as they kind of do this tit for tat thing. And then May 12th, about a month later, we have this 90-day pause or reduction down to 30%, which I believe is the same flat 10% plus a 20% like fentanyl or something like that. But again, it's not my expertise. So there's a lot of change there from Trump.
You're on.
Yeah, that's right.
You got it. So right now today, but there's still tariffs in place, right? You pay your regular duty, and duty and tariffs the same word basically, but duty's always been there. You pay your regular duty that you've always paid on products from any country. So completed bags are 17.6%, whether they come from China, whether they come from Korea, whether they come from Vietnam, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
There's a 25% tariff from China that was in 2018, and that is still on, right? So you've absorbed that, we've all absorbed that, and we've sold it and increased prices since then. And now today, there's another 30% from China for 90 days, and there's 10% from the rest of the countries.
Now
So
that 30%, is that on top of the 25% from 2018? Okay.
Only on.
the 25 is on bags.
Oh, only on bags.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's product
Finished
specific.
bags.
They made a lot of exemptions. So,
Subject by product, really. It's all
Right.
different.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
so
Yeah.
but the 30% is right now is across the board, except if it's like auto parts and iPhone, all the
Yeah,
people who can
yes.
afford to pay for this shit.
And it is
You
on thin bags, mainly single bags, and that's where the Amazon world has
Right.
Yeah.
hurt us more because their prices are lower on single bags, and we have to deal with the 25.
Yeah, and that's something I want to get into later as well, because I think there's a lot of consumers that don't necessarily understand some of the strategy of Amazon that they might find interesting. But so with all of those percentages changing, did you guys kind of, Trump's elected, you have a particular strategy, and then it changes on Liberation Day, and then changes on the 90-day pause? Or are you guys, that you're comfortable with sharing in terms of your guys' strategy?
When Trump was elected and he campaigned on tariffs, I think everybody thought it was going to be 10%. I mean, and I have friends who own businesses that import, and we're all kind of like, okay, if it goes in place, it's 10%, we can figure that out.
Right.
Then when it goes to 145, there's no strategy. There's still, it was a difficult strategy to come up with today because of the uncertainty. What's going to happen in the next 75 days now? I mean, these guys heard me say it a million times. Anybody who says, well, this is going to happen, we have no idea. I mean, we know if 30 goes to 0, it's not going to go to 0, I wouldn't think. But we don't know if it ends on 30, if it ends on 50. How do you plan? So when all this happened from us for Strikeforce, we had, Brian, who's not here, who runs operations here, and Jason and I had 3 calls a week with Asia, with different factories, literally, at 8:30 at night, and I go to bed at 9:30. Not embarrassed. And I get up at 4:30. And we had these calls and trying to figure it out. And we were lucky skilled, whatever. We had a great shoe vendor, big company in Vietnam. And they stepped up for us, and we shifted we shifted tens of thousands of pairs to them in that 90-day period. They said they can get them done. So they're working on them. Jason and I in 2018 visited this huge bag factory. And we were looking back to pictures.
Also in Vietnam.
And we were looking at pictures, and I'm like, what was that guy's name? And I looked it up, and I'm like, oh,
He
that guy
had it too, which was
I
crazy,
couldn't believe
right?
I came up with it. And then Jason got back from China. 2 weeks later, went to Vietnam, spent 10 days there, got back last week, and he's going again back there on June 16th. So we're going to be in decent shape. However, now we're also taking all the product that was on order in China, several $1 million that we held there. And now we're taking that in at 30%.
Yeah.
And, we're going to have a lot of it.
Yeah, and
Oh, that's okay. That's good to know.
quick funny story. So
Please.
on Liberation Day, Fab and I are in China, right?
Oh, okay.
And so we're meeting with our suppliers up to that point, and we're talking about, what's going to happen and all this stuff, 10%, no big deal. They're all just basically telling us, you're going to raise your price, the consumer's going to pay it, all is good in the world, right? So then April 2nd happens and it goes up a little bit, and they're like, oh my, what's going to happen, right? And then as we're still there, it goes up again. And then they realize, oh, this is our problem now. What are we going to do? And we basically then went through every purchase order that we had in place and put it on hold, canceled what we could. Sometimes you can't cancel. There's materials, whether it's, upper material for a shoe or an outsole that's already been purchased, ready for manufacturing. And, so you can't cancel it. So we put all that stuff on hold. And But it was very interesting to see how the tide turns, when it goes from a small number
to a big number. No, it's a great segue because anyone who knows me knows I really hate kind of the tribalization and polarization, I guess, of content around anything with politics, and you mentioned something there that is kind of you saw a lot of within the tribes, right? Which was, oh, US is going to be the one that really has the most problem here, and then for me, I tried to listen to Scott Dissent the most because Trump doesn't really ever seem like he has any details on that kind of stuff. And he was saying like, no, the country that has the bigger trade deficit is normally, kind of has the advantage. And so I don't know if you were speaking to that a little bit, Jason, from your real life experience there with China, is that as the percentage rose, you said they felt like it became more of their problem?
Yeah, but
or am I mischaracterizing that?
Let me interject this because
please.
In the first couple of days when he and I talk every day when he's there, was like they had the attitude of, this is your problem, not ours. And then by the end, Jason's like, they got it when we canceled, 10 containers.
Yeah, right. It did.
It's their problem. The difference is Trump keeps saying, China's going to eat the tariffs, like Mexico's building the wall, right? China's going to eat the tariffs. And we went to, when it was 10% or 20%, we went to some of our vendors and they're like, yeah, we'll give you 2%. We'll give you 0. I mean, it was like nothing, right?
Yeah.
Inconsequential. So one, they're not even, are they hurting? Yes, but similar to what we did with the PPP money in COVID, China has the ability, being a socialist, communist state, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They can help their manufacturers out.
Yeah.
They can bail them out easier. They have a shitload of money and they're doing it. I mean, are these factories sat empty for months?
They are. And when they are talking about the future and the government's making decisions about the future, they're not looking at next year or 10 years or 20 years down the road. They're looking at 50 years down the road or 100 years down the road.
Yeah, you hear that.
How that's going to impact,
Right.
Totally.
So, and it sounds like my understanding, because that's really what I want most here is at a micro level, I hope to help bowling consumers, pro shops kind of better understand the landscape. And then even at a macro level, I hope anyone who's a general consumer who has followed this topic is a little bit more informed from a real life scenario, and not like clickbait and, angry tirades, but is a little bit more informed on tariffs and kind of, and how they work. So it sounds like, China doesn't operate in the classic economical sense that the idea that it's hurting them more because, the buyer is no longer buying isn't necessarily true because they can help be supported by the government is my understanding. Is that a fair summary?
There's two things, right? So one, the government will support them, whether they devalue their dollar. I mean, there's a lot of things they can do there, right?
Right.
Number two, all the material suppliers are shipping the materials to, the nylon for bags come from China to Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
So while their exports to the United States were down 60%, their imports to all these other countries were way up. Is it hurting them? Sure, absolutely.
It's hurting suppliers in China as well.
It hurts this, yes.
Sources.
Yeah, it is. It's, when you go to try to source a product at a different country, right? And you go and all this, the first thing you learn is, oh yeah, the material comes from China, right? Even though you're trying to like get out and you're trying to find a different
It's
way to do it, it's like, oh,
yeah,
so
Well,
yeah,
and-
it's there, right?
And there's shoemaking's hard. You could talk to Paul Sylvia Dexter, right? I mean, shoemaking is really, it's manual labor. We've been in these factories. It's hard work. We don't have people to make shoes here, right? We just don't. I mean, and nor are we going to. Unemployment numbers came out today. It's 4%. 5% of the people don't want to work anyways. So, we don't have these jobs. We're not bringing these jobs back.
right.
And I'm politically a total centrist.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think I am as well. And that's why I would like to try to find good sources. And that's why I can't thank you guys enough for the time. So now let's kind of dial that back into bowling, I guess. How do you, I guess start off with kind of the manufacturer side and cost. Trump talks about, there's this back and forth with him recently with Walmart in terms of them needing to eat the tariffs. How much do you guys expect? It sounds to me like there's at least an attempt to diversify from China at the minimum, right? You guys are talking about Vietnam and some of those other places. So it's probably fair to assume other manufacturers are trying to diversify away from China a little bit, as well. Do you expect manufacturers to eat it, so to speak, as Trump says, or do you think most manufacturers are going to be passing that on? Because it's already such a tight margin game, right?
It's
But
both.
it
It's
is,
both, right? So we're going to take margin hits for sure. We're trying to cover some of the dollars, most of the dollars, but
yeah,
it's both, right? Everyone's going to.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And I do feel like the world is adjusting and trying to diversify, right? And go to different countries. I don't have a great feel that bowling is doing that. I mean, as much as we are, I don't feel like bowling is doing that, right? But I don't know what that means exactly. But I do know that, our main focus when it went to 145% was we got to figure out how we're going to supply, the market come the beginning of bowling season and for the holidays. And that's why, we made those trips to other countries to try to figure it out.
I think it goes into another kind of great set of questions, which is really, I think as a pro shop now, there is, will it be any, in terms of all the product categories, is there any categories or any products that we should expect either will have a gap of time where they might be hard to get, because there were manufacturers maybe canceling orders for a certain time period, so nothing was coming in, or was there so much additional ordering?
No, but I also think too, if you would have seen, if they wouldn't have put a relax, or a reduction on the Chinese tariff, right? You would have maybe seen more of that, maybe for a little bit. But I think, now that it's down to a lower percentage, that everybody else is like, let's go, right?
Nobody was bringing in.
And nobody was doing that, but from a sales standpoint for our team to the pro shops, our message to them was, look, buy as much as you possibly can now, because we don't know A, what it's going to cost, or B, what's going to be available, right?
Be higher.
I mean, right now is today is the cheapest day you can buy anything.
Mhm.
Tomorrow's going to be more money, and it's never going to. I'll say never, but I could almost be confident it will never be lower.
Right. Yeah, totally. So BBIA was recent. Was this a topic at all there? And how much did you talk to other manufacturers about, these kinds of things? How much of it is kind of a competitive edge versus trying to connect with one another and figure out what's going on.
BBIA, and I was there this last week, and it generally is a relaxed, informal meeting. You do have side formal times to meet with each distributor, but the tariff conversation was top of everyone's mind. And, the manufacturers, generally speaking, all get along with one another, and, everyone's in the same boat, right? Jason's heard me say it a lot, but, the high tide raises all ships, and I want my competitors to make money. I want everybody in the whole industry, from manufacturer to distributor to pro shop to internet site. I want everybody to do well, because then we invest back in our sport and our industry. And, we need that. We need everybody pulling together, not fighting against each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate that sentiment, because there's still certainly not everyone thinks that way. I just remember the other question that I forgot, which was the distributor supply chain, right? So if you're not viewing it exactly like you're saying, where it's KR versus someone else, but it's bowling versus, other forms of entertainment or things that people can spend their disposable income on, some of those are much more direct to consumer than what bowling is, that has a distributor supply chain. This whole tariff situation, do you think it helps bowling or the distributor supply chain? Do you think that aspect of our supply chain helps in this situation, or hurts, or doesn't really have an impact?
I mean, we have an old school supply chain, but tariffs in general hurt bowling because, people need to feed their kids, and they might drop out of a bowling league, right? Because there's so much money to go around with the inflation that will be coming. So, I remember the last recession, 08, 09, 10, and we lost a lot of bowling centers, and we lost a lot of pro shops, and, we could lose them here again. We're collateral damage to the government's will.
Yeah.
Well, he's right, but I don't feel like, look, anytime anything goes up, right, consumers are going to have to make a decision, right? Are you going to put food on the table, or are you going to buy a $200 ball, right?
Piece of games,
it probably won't, right? Maybe not. Rental shoes go up, whatever. Maybe that would change, right? But I've always felt like bowling, from a recreation or entertainment or any standpoint like that, is, through the recession, it's not proof, but it's resilient, right? And it's because it's a low cost entertainment type, right? But where the places that get hurt during that is, you might still bowl league on Tuesdays. You're going to drink 2 beers instead of 3, and you're going to buy 2 balls that season instead of 3 or 4, right?
Right.
It's the secondary items, the gear and the other stuff, I think, that always, get hurt.
Right. So, do you think then that, is there any category you think that's going to get hit the hardest here, in terms of the tariffs? Or
no, I think it's serious. It's all but balls, honestly.
Okay. Everything but also get hit pretty evenly.
Yeah.
And there's a company, a bowling manufacturer, pretty heavy on cleaners, right? That is a lot more direct to consumer than maybe some of the other manufacturers that have been around a while.
Yeah.
In my mind, I would think that they would maybe have a bigger margin, which would give them maybe somewhat of an advantage in this situation
To absorb,
right?
Yeah.
And not have their prices change at all.
Sure. Well, and look, that is, that's part of the whole chain, right? And the channel is, we sell it to the distributor sells it to the pro shop sells it to the consumer, right? Or to the e-tailer or whatever it is, right? And there's all these, hands in the cookie jar. And when, each person needs a cookie, right? The end just keeps going up and up. So maybe so, yes, but But the one thing that I've learned in the whole distribution channel is is we've got a huge catalog of products, right? Tons of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Our distributors support us and buy everything in that book, right? And without that, we wouldn't sell all that stuff.
Well, you would need to go direct. You would need
You have
salesmen on the ground, more customer service. There's so
Tons of
many
things.
SKUs in our industry. I think it would be pretty difficult to do it.
And even the shops buy them one at a time,
yeah, like you wouldn't want to buy,
2 sets of grips.
or even, if you wanted to buy flyer mesh for your pro shop and you needed a size 10 and 6 were in a box, you had to buy 6 at a time, right? Or whatever. That's not advantageous for a pro shop,
Right. Yeah. And so, that almost could be a whole nother conversation that we could have in terms of trying to kind of understand the pros and cons of it. Because, my initial thought would be like, okay, well, as a new company, then why would you? If there's a big advantage to use the distributor supply chain, why would you go direct to consumer first, And so it's trying to kind of understand, is a lot of that the fact that if you're a company that is created during where direct to consumer is not a thing and you have the distributor supply chain, is that an environment that ends up allowing you to end up creating a lot of SKUs? And then when direct to consumer comes along and becomes an option, you have a lot of SKUs, and the transition from distributor supply chain to more direct to consumer is just a lot more uncomfortable.
Maybe. I do think, though, there is some correlation between what's going on and the whole, through distribution or direct to consumer, right? It is as prices go up, margins go down, right? As everybody tries to compete, so I think, when we made a decision to try to source from a different country, right? A different factory, we were only interested in going with our great products that sell really good, the core products, right?
Keep the price down.
And try to keep the price down instead of bringing out all these new bags and shoes and accessories.
In those other countries.
There still is, but I guess what I'm saying is, we want to, when times get tough, you want to go small and long instead of big, tons of offerings and with, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Right.
No, that makes sense. I guess with that being said, and like the idea of consolidating products, do you guys foresee, and I have to emphasize, this is only rumor mill that I've heard, is that, Dexter's shoes, potentially, they may not have shoes until December or something like that. Do you guys see any, now there can't really be consolidation with Dexter because they're part of a much larger company, but we've seen a lot of consolidation over the years.
Warren Buffett's got the cash to buy us, though.
Yeah. So my question is with this tariff thing, all of this moving, do you see potential more consolidation in bowling in any particular way? I mean, Brad mentioned a little bit.
Sure. It was going on anyways. I don't know if the tariff thing makes it go quicker or not,
or has any effect on it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it was going on anyways.
Yeah.
Whether that be,
and Dexter's gonna have shoes before December.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's hard because that's the thing, is it's so much in our industry. There's always rumor, and you never know what's fact.
No, they're gonna have it.
So the other thing I really wanted to kind of have you guys educate me on, open my eyes up on, as well as viewers, is Amazon's impact on, because a lot of my understanding is a lot of maybe FBA products that might be Amazon, that might be brands that consumers have never even seen or heard of before, that are 1-2 day away Amazon Prime products. My understanding is a good amount of those are manufactured in China. And because, like you said, a lot of the non-ball products are manufactured in China. And so can you help me and consumers understand what has been that trend in Amazon over the last 10 years in terms of seeing really the mainstream brands that bowling consumers are used to seeing on there, now seeing a lot of brands that maybe we've never heard of. How has that impacted KR Strikeforce, other manufacturers, and maybe we'll stop at that. I'll try to not ask you 7 questions at one time.
well, look, I mean, it's in the like single ball tote, double roller category, it's hurt, right? Because we can't compete, but some of that has to do with how they import it. I mean, there's a gazillion things that go into, to what it is, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's because they're selling a double roller for $59.95, whether it's Go Himmel or Mangrove or whatever, like these.
Can you share with people though, how does that come about, right? How does a business, this company pop up?
Yeah,
start
so
selling double ball rollers?
they do some research, right? And they see that this segment of product has some units behind it, right? It has some steam. So then they, create a product, right? And then they ship it to an Amazon warehouse direct from China.
And remember,
right?
There's 100, I don't know how many Amazon warehouses. They can literally ship it all to one warehouse, and then Amazon separates it. So they ship it to the West
They'll
Coast,
distribute
and then
it,
Amazon
right?
is
Right.
running all day.
And that's where this.
Duty.
Well, that's where the de minimis thing comes in when you hear that about, like, Temu and Shein and all those other, right?
But they're shipping full containers. So one, they're messing with the paperwork, but they're also
right.
not using the correct tariff numbers. I think people in bowling aren't using the correct tariff numbers. And I've said that. I'm not doing it. I mean, we've gone through this over the years, and there's a general bowling equipment tariff number. We tried legally to be able to use it, and actually hired a lawyer, applied to the government, Customs and Border Protection, and because we know some people are using it, it's all public records, and
Interesting. Huh?
and not using the bag one, and we just won't do it. And eventually it's going to catch up to them, and when it does, then we're still in business. We'll be the winner, but it's going to catch up to them.
Yeah, but back to the Amazon thing, right? It's the de minimis thing. If the shipment is under $800 total, it's kind of like falsifying paperwork, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to be somewhat.
No, I appreciate it. I like this.
But it's that. So if that whole shipment is under a certain amount, it's not subject to this duty and tariff, and then they land it at the warehouse, and then they distribute it out, and the next thing you know, it's $59.95. And when somebody brings in a blank ball to your pro shop, they're rolling it in a Mangrove double, and you're like, oh, you bought that on Amazon? Like, yeah, how did you know?
I mean, I'm looking at Amazon now. Mangrove, Golani,
Go Himmel.
Oh, it's crazy. When I did the research for the first time, my head exploded.
Yeah.
And there's tools, that you can download and pay for that tell you, exactly like Jason was saying, the units sold of particular categories. And now, when I was looking into this, I started, learning about Home Depot or Walmart strategy over the years, where they started having these brands that really they manufactured, like Kirkland, or I think Home Depot has like a home quality, or I don't remember what it is, but they have these brands. You walk in on a shelf, doesn't look like a Home Depot product. But my understanding, which is very elementary, is if they saw a product, if it was an opportunity to, add revenue, add margin to some degree, if they saw a product was moving in their stores really well, and they could potentially go manufacture and source it themselves and put a different brand on it. So my question with that is, do you guys get any sense that these are maybe like Amazon products? Is this something that Amazon does, or do you think this is individual sellers that just have a strategy?
Sometimes I think it's the same company with different names,
That's the third option, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
even though they're
it could be
different.
Amazon, but
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Well, and I think it was when I was working for Brunswick, which was a long time ago, right? And I don't know if it was Tony or whatever, but I believe Amazon went to Brunswick and wanted like an Amazon basic bowling brand. And at that point they said, no, look, we sell through distributors, all that stuff, right? So then that was totally squashed.
Right.
But you would think, that's how I see it as being, right? As it's something like these brands are like that, right? They're like the
They're all-
Amazon basic,
seems
instead
like
of,
they're all based in China because
Yeah,
all
of
the
course.
videos have the the presenter of the video. You can tell where
Yeah.
they're from, and they're standing in the middle of a park.
yeah, they don't, it's not a bowling center. It's not,
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's-
So I think it's important for consumers to know then, like, to summarize that, people will see demand on Amazon. People go to Amazon for the convenience. They'll see the demand of a product on Amazon. And then if they have a background in understanding manufacturing or sourcing, they can figure out the best way to manufacture or source a product there. And then the way that they really compete, again, my understanding from listening to Brad, isn't really in the quality of product, but understanding all of the policy details and loopholes of how can we source and manufacture this and get it, and maybe, fib a little bit here and there on tariffs or the amount that we, get into the States at one time, or what we classify the product as. But the way they really compete is not necessarily on quality of product, but more of like understanding those details and trying to take advantage of them. Is that about right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Or
I think
And
that's
then it goes direct to the consumer, not
right. Yeah. No distributor, no pro shop, no, right. There's all those
No
other,
support of the PBA.
yeah, right.
exactly. Yeah. No, that's and Jason has heard me go on long-winded rants about a lot of these scenarios, because so much of the money ends up on Amazon or to shipping companies and not bowling. But so my last question, I guess, then that leads into the pro shop side, as you guys are seeing trends like that on those products. Jason and Mike with pro shops, what do you guys think the future looks like for pro shops in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Because obviously, what do you guys see? Are you seeing trends on Amazon that would indicate that people are like, no, I don't want this random branded double, or they just want convenience, right? So
Yeah.
how should pro
I'll
shops?
let them answer, but because I don't know, but I'm betting the under on Mike in 30 years.
Well, look, I think,
That's my over under.
as
30 years.
as we, and the business as well as anybody, right? You see, and we see it from like when we make pro shop visits, right? It seems like as the products that don't involve a service, right? Like there's no service when you're selling a pair of shoes or a bag or
Right.
an accessory, right?
Right.
Seem to be, there's in the pro shop world, it seems like there's less of that stuff on display, right? And I feel like it also separates, some of the good stores from the great stores, right? Or the great ones still understand that, you need to have a little bit of everything to, because there's always that impulse, right? And I think that, look, I've got, we could go on for hours about this because I've got a million different types of, theories on what's going to happen. But I think the good pro shops are going to have all that stuff still, right? They have to, right? Because you can't just be a,
the good shops have to go deeper with their selection.
yeah, right. You got to make sure you have it, right? And that's the one thing that we've been preaching as to our pro shops and distributors through this is, look, invest as much as you can right now in inventory because,
Right.
it's going to pay off later. Never be cheaper, but I think I don't see, like we see it all the time in our shop. I swear to God, the Black Widow 3.0 is the most brought in blank ball of our pro shop, right? And then if you go to Amazon and you look up, it's got like a top rated, item classification,
So what do you so what's the economics of that though? What do you charge for Black Widow? You buy it from you and
it would be the same. Like our MRP of the ball, right? Whatever it is, $159.95, $50 to drill it, $209. We're the exact same. You buy it from us, you buy it from Amazon.
But if I bring
Whatever.
it in to have it drilled, am I still 50?
Yeah.
Or am I 60.
Still the same. Look, I've thrown, and look, that's another rabbit hole, right? But
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
but that's how we, because with the power of this, right? And you've seen it in your stores too. They look at it and they're like, okay, how much is it to drill a ball if I bring it in? Oh, it's 50. Okay, look at their phone. They're like, well, do you have this in stock? Yeah, I do. Okay, I'll take one. Right?
Yeah.
So,
but I think so that's a great segue to, and I'm going to wrap this up. I can't believe I got all three of you guys. You guys are all very important, busy people. So we're going to try to finish this up before 11.
We won't even get lunch off now.
Exactly. So, and this is probably again a rabbit hole, like Jason mentioned. But so, we're talking about kind of that the Amazon aspect, the convenience of it, right? We talked about the distributor supply chain, and I also mentioned at the beginning, the massive push you guys have had with content. And my question to you is, you don't see it as a potential, right now, if someone sees KR Strikeforce's great content and they go to search for your product, they can't really buy it from you, right? And almost every place that they go to buy at this point has become your competitor, I would argue, right? Like, they're going to probably land on Bowler's Mart or Bowling Ball and all of these companies. And I may be speaking out of line here. I'm not very good at having a filter in, when something's recorded and whatnot, but, they now go straight to a place that is going to, have an incentive to put a different product in front of their face that's not yours. And they landed on that site because you guys invested in content, right? And so they land on that site because of money that you spend, but then they might end up buying a competing product, right? Because you guys don't have a direct consumer option. So how do you guys think about that in terms of the future of the industry?
Man, I don't.
That's a perfect question to end on.
It really is. I mean, there is. I mean, I think as long as, the bowling channel still exists, I think we're going to sell through distributors, right? I mean, until that, and look, that's been, a consolidating piece of it as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That was a question I had. I didn't ask, was about what you guys' thoughts were on the Brunswick.
We take pride in our products where when they do see what we offer, they will make
Comparable
a choice first,
Sure.
Lower priced item or.
We're fully committed to the distribution channel.
Yeah. Is there a world where you think you can do both?
And no, I think it's the problem you identified is we spend a ton of money, time, resources on our social media, and Matt Farber and Ben, you've done a great job with it. And really, I mean, I can't believe how many people follow it and watch these videos. And yeah, we're penalized a little bit because they can't come to krstrikeforce.com and order it. Our new site, I don't know if you've been on it, our new site looks fantastic.
It does, yeah.
Switch it to Shopify, but it's not, we didn't switch it so we could sell. The old site could sell, by flipping a switch. And the new site can also by flipping a switch. We just Matt Farber wanted to look better because the old site was shitty and the new site looks great. And but the old one could flip a switch too. It's a whole nother set of can of worms. And right, now you need customer service. We got
more shipping people, right?
Well, we got 3 people in the building that can talk to, we need 10 people, so we're not prepared for that.
Yeah, no, totally understandable. Jason knows it's kind of the topic that I really love to debate and talk about is, really thinking of that exact question as, is it short-term pain for long-term benefit or not, and it's an interesting topic for me. But anyways, guys, that's my time. I can't thank you guys enough. Those of you that watched the video, let me know down below what your thoughts on all of this is. And if there's somebody else you'd like to see me kind of interview in the industry that I haven't done yet, make sure you check out all the previous tour talks. But something I only hop on and do during times like this where I think it can be really useful. We're not really doing it for clicks or to try to make money, but to try to help spread solid information like these guys gave today. Jason, Mike, Brad, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. It was really informative.
No, thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good day. Happy Memorial Day.
Yeah, you guys too. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.